Okay, putting the flap servo into this hole here. The only reason the V's there is for the printing, and the idea is that you've got to cut a slot out there. If you look inside here, you can see there's a line. There's actually like a wall inside the print. So if you didn't want to use the flaps, you'd have a nice surface. And anyway, I don't understand why you do that, but anyway, you might. But if you look in there, so you've got it's about 3mm deep that you've got to cut. So basically enough to clear the thickness of the servo arm. So just got to remember the exact spot, so it doesn't need to go any further back than wherever your servo arm is going to, because you want ideally to go from there 90 degrees forward, so that the load on your servo when the wind's blowing on it's locked in that direction. You don't want it down here when the flap's down, because then it'll be pulling on the maximum mechanical advantage. Now, this is just a cheap and nasty 9G just to show you how this works. I would probably use a nicer servo. These ones are a little bit longer, so it doesn't quite fit as neatly in there, but I can tell you that the servo plug comes out up here, so that's how you're getting your wires internally. There's a hole all the way through. It does go in, it's not that hard. You might just fiddle with it for a minute. So I'll cut this bit out. Actually, I haven't cut this before, so we'll see how it goes. Because in the prototype I put the servo in the wing, but now I've got retracts. I haven't got any space for a servo, so that's where this has got to go. So we'll see how we do with this. Make sure we're in the camera, in the frame. So a reasonably sharp knife. So you shouldn't have any open structure when you finish cutting this, because of the internal walls. So it's so you can see the wall back there, so we can go back a little bit further. No, don't cut yourself. My famous last words. You ideally just trim it to whatever you need, really. So yeah, that's about the right depth. It's not quite a little bit more off on the front. So now we put the servo wire in. I mean, every servo is a little bit different, but you get the idea. Don't worry, the plug actually goes in there quite nicely. And hey, presto, it goes in flush. You might want a longer arm. It's not such a big deal, as long as it gets to where it needs to be. And what I see, it's relatively flush. Go as far as you need to go. But it shouldn't stick out, because your inner wing's going to fit neatly against there. Good thing about this is you can get to this, you can change the arm, you can adjust it, you can do all sorts of things. It's not buried in there, it's locked, not locked in. This particular servo fits in there quite nicely. I used, normally, personally I like the Corona servos. This is the thin one. I think this hole is better suited to the 939 MG is the one that fits better in there. It's not as thin as this, which is good for wings. It's a slightly fatter one, but anyway, it's about the same size as this, but it's a fairly generic servo, whatever you like to use. Being the flaps, it probably doesn't need to be quite as well. I like the precision more on my control surfaces, but I don't know, probably wouldn't use something too cheap. These particular servos here, they had plastic gears and things. I actually pulled it out of another plane and replaced it, but the size is the idea. So anyway, that goes in there. I would wrap it with a bit of masking tape, personally. Maybe a bit of hot glue or Gorilla Glue or just something so it bonds it in there and doesn't flop around. That's reasonably tight fit. And that's how you get your flap servo in there. And it should just maneuver like that. Far enough forward. If you've got to cut a little bit more away, so be it. But anyway, that's the idea.